Alright, everyone. Get ready, because the backstory of this film is a complete tangle, filled with twists, turns, and multiple shifts in creative vision and studio involvement spanning nearly a decade. The adaptation of Stephen King's legendary The Dark Tower novel series has faced numerous hurdles over many years, becoming a saga of its own behind the scenes. The Dark Tower, consisting of 8 novels and 1 novella published from 1982 to 2012, follows Roland Deschain on his epic quest to reach a mythical tower that is the nexus of all universes. A story that intricately weaves together elements of dark fantasy, horror, and Western genres. This unique genre fusion, combined with the series' sprawling narrative and deeply philosophical undertones, has made it particularly challenging to adapt into a film or television format, as capturing the tone and complexity is no small feat. For a long time, King himself hesitated to sell the movie rights, fearing that the depth and nuance of his creation would be lost or diluted in the hands of filmmakers. However, around 2007, the co-creators of the hit TV series Lost, J.J. Abrams, Carlton Cuse, and Damon Lindelof, optioned the rights, bringing renewed hope to fans of the series. King, a devoted Lost fan, trusted these showrunners to lead the project thoughtfully and respectfully, given their track record with complex narratives. A year later, the project entered early development, but progress slowed as Lindelof and Abrams had to complete their commitments to Lost and the Star Trek reboot, causing significant delays. As Lost progressed, Lindelof's enthusiasm for the Dark Tower project waned, and by 2009, he openly expressed doubts, saying he hoped someone else would take over the adaptation because he feared he might ruin the book after 6 intense years of working on Lost. Later that same year, Abrams stepped away due to other commitments, effectively halting development and casting doubt on the adaptation's future. 5 months after Abrams' departure, Universal Pictures acquired the property, ambitiously planning a trilogy of films, with 2 TV seasons designed to bridge the cinematic installments. Akiva Goldsman was tapped to write the screenplay, and Ron Howard was lined up to direct, with high-profile actors such as Daniel Craig, Hugh Jackman, and Viggo Mortensen considered to portray Roland, though no final casting decisions were ever confirmed. A tentative release date was set for May 17, 2013, but the film had not yet been officially greenlit, requiring studio approval by July 2011 to avoid the rights reverting back to King. In 2011, Mark Verheiden joined the television side of the adaptation. And the announcement that Javier Bardem would star as Roland generated considerable excitement among fans and industry insiders. However, rumors soon surfaced about budget constraints and Universal reconsidering the scale and scope of the project. The movie remained under Universal's wing, but with a reduced budget. Consequently, Goldsman undertook a rewrite of the script to accommodate these new financial realities. Production was originally scheduled to begin in September 2011, but was pushed back to early 2012 due to ongoing budget concerns and studio hesitation. With the green light still pending, and the project's future hanging in the balance amid the shifting priorities and challenges of adapting such a beloved and complex series. In July, the adaptation was officially canceled due to persistent budget issues that caused financial instability from the start, undermining investor and studio confidence in the project's viability. This cancellation was a significant setback for the creative team, who had hoped to bring the complex narrative to a wide audience through a high-profile adaptation. Following this, Ron Howard, Akiva Goldsman, and Stephen King actively sought a new studio willing to take on the challenging project, ultimately resulting in HBO acquiring the television rights. HBO's interest in a serialized format was strategic, as the intricate and sprawling nature of the source material lent itself better to episodic storytelling, allowing for deeper character development and a more faithful adaptation of the layered plotlines. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers showed intermittent interest in producing a film version of the story. In 2012, Goldsman delivered a full script, and Russell Crowe was considered for the lead role of Roland, which generated some excitement. However, Warner Brothers ultimately passed on the project, citing doubts about its commercial viability in an industry increasingly focused on blockbuster franchises with guaranteed mass appeal. Between 2012 and 2014, progress was slow and speculative, with rumors swirling about actors like Aaron Paul and Liam Neeson potentially joining the cast. But no firm plans or commitments materialized. The project gained new momentum in 2015 when Sony Pictures partnered with Media Rights Capital, collaborating on a fresh script penned by Goldsman and Jeff Pinkner. Around this time, Ron Howard stepped down as director but remained involved as a producer. Nikolai Arcel was brought on as the new director and worked closely with screenwriter Anders Thomas Jensen to rewrite the script, aiming to balance the epic scope of the story with character-driven moments. The film was scheduled for release in January 2017, with Matthew McConaughey cast as Roland and Idris Elba set to play a key supporting role. However, the release was postponed to February 17 to allow additional time for post-production work. Principal photography, which took place in South Africa, wrapped several months later, but the post-production phase was marred by serious creative and logistical challenges. Initial rough cuts of the film were poorly received by test audiences and insiders, prompting discussions about bringing in a new filmmaker to re-edit the footage. Test screenings were disastrous, revealing issues with pacing, character depth, and narrative clarity. In response, Sony and MRC invested an additional $6 million in reshoots designed to enhance character development and clarify the complex plot. The post-production process was described by Variety as chaotic, complicated further by the contractual arrangement between Sony and MRC, which granted MRC veto power over marketing decisions and the final cut of the film. Stephen King also held veto power over major creative choices, sometimes leading to tension within the production team. The film's release date was delayed multiple times as these issues were addressed. When it finally premiered on August 4, 2017, the movie opened with a $19 million box office take and briefly topped the charts, but quickly lost momentum. Despite significant investment, high-profile talent, and much anticipation, the adaptation ultimately became a commercial disappointment, failing to resonate with a broad audience and falling short of expectations both critically and financially. In the United States, The Dark Tower earned $50 million domestically and $62 million internationally, totaling $113 million worldwide. With a $60 million production budget, it wasn't a complete box office failure, but fell short of expectations, especially given its star power and beloved source material. Movies typically need to earn 2 to 3 times their budget to break even due to marketing, distribution, and theater cuts, meaning The Dark Tower likely lost money overall despite its seemingly respectable gross. Critically, it was panned, holding a 16% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and low audience ratings, reflecting its failure to connect with viewers, both familiar and unfamiliar, with Stephen King's expansive universe. The film's troubled production, often described as production hell, was plagued by numerous challenges, including script rewrites, creative disagreements among producers, and a rushed shooting schedule that ultimately hindered the coherence and depth of the final product. Director Ron Howard later admitted that the PG-13 rating diluted the story's darker themes significantly, a rating chosen strategically to maximize box office potential by appealing to a broader, younger audience, but widely criticized by Stephen King himself, who felt this decision weakened the adaptation and stripped it of the eerie, mature tone that made the original novel so compelling. Sony's broad marketing campaign aimed to attract a wide audience by emphasizing action and fantasy elements. But this approach alienated many dedicated fans who expected a more faithful and darker film, true to the source material's complex mythology and tone. Forbes' Paul Tassi noted that this generic approach stripped away the story's unique appeal, reducing it to a typical fantasy action spectacle without the depth that set the novels apart. And even the star power from Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey couldn't compensate for these shortcomings. Their performances, while competent, were unable to overcome the film's structural and tonal issues, echoing similar failures seen in other high-profile adaptations, such as Tom Cruise's The Mummy, which also suffered from a lack of clear vision and marketing missteps. The confusing marketing strategy, which failed to clearly position the film's identity, likely doomed The Dark Tower's commercial prospects by alienating both longtime fans longing for a faithful adaptation, and newcomers who found the story's mythology inaccessible and muddled. Furthermore, the rushed post-production process left little room for refining visual effects or narrative clarity, which compounded audience dissatisfaction. The film's visual effects, though ambitious, suffered from noticeable inconsistencies and a lack of polish, which detracted from the immersive experience that fans had hoped for. As a result, despite its promising premise, star-studded cast, and considerable budget, The Dark Tower serves as a cautionary tale about the challenges of adapting beloved literary works into films that satisfy both commercial demands and fan expectations, illustrating how compromises in tone, storytelling, and marketing can collectively undermine a project's potential success and long-lasting legacy in the cinematic landscape. What happened to the two planned sequels and the TV series? After the film's release, Arcel revealed that a sequel was intended to draw heavily from the second book in Stephen King's Dark Tower series, The Drawing of the Three, which would introduce pivotal characters such as Eddie Dean and Susanna Dean. The plan was to have the original cast members return in order to maintain continuity and preserve the cinematic world's cohesion, giving fans a seamless transition from the first film to the next. However, the realization of this sequel was largely contingent on the box office performance of the initial movie. Unfortunately, the film's financial returns were underwhelming, failing to meet expectations, and thereby causing the studio to shelve the sequel indefinitely. Despite this setback, some development work continued on a potential television series that could expand the story more comprehensively. By 2016, the TV adaptation was scheduled for a 2018 debut, with Glenn Mazzara attached as showrunner. This series was envisioned to adapt not only Wizard and Glass, but also The Wind Through the Keyhole and The Gunslinger, effectively covering significant portions of the source material. Idris Elba and Tom Taylor, who portrayed key roles in the film, were expected to reprise their characters, which excited the fanbase, eager for faithful continuity. However, the tepid reception and disappointing box office results of the movie caused these television plans to be delayed indefinitely. By late 2017, Stephen King himself indicated that the TV series would likely be a reboot, no longer connected to HBO, which had originally been involved. Subsequently, Amazon acquired the rights, keeping Glenn Mazzara as showrunner, but signaling that a recasting of the roles was expected to better align with their new vision. In 2019, actors Jasper Pakinen and Sand Strike were cast, and a pilot episode was filmed in Croatia. This pilot was then presented to Amazon executives, but after careful evaluation, the company decided to cancel the project, feeling that it did not align with the tone and quality of their other original programming. This decision led to the abandonment of the series for several years. It wasn't until 2022 that the project was revived, with the announcement that Mike Flanagan, a director well known for his successful adaptations of Stephen King's works, would helm a new Dark Tower adaptation. This new iteration was initially planned to span 5 seasons, supplemented by 2 standalone films, potentially to be distributed on Amazon's streaming platform. Since then, updates on the project have been relatively sparse. But in October 2024, at New York Comic-Con, Flanagan shared that doing justice to the Dark Tower saga requires a faithful adaptation of all the books, praising King's richly detailed and immersive universe. He reflected on the story's deceptively simple beginning, one person following another across a vast desert landscape, but acknowledged that the complexity and depth of the material make the creative process painstakingly slow and challenging. These comments underscore the ambitious scope of the project and the dedication required to bring such a beloved and intricate narrative to life on screen. Now that we've explored the complex history of the Dark Tower adaptations, I want to share my personal take on the 2017 film. I've never read the books, so my view is that of an average viewer encountering the movie as a standalone piece, without fan-driven expectations or preconceptions. My critique focuses solely on the film itself, allowing me to assess it purely on cinematic merits and storytelling effectiveness, without the influence of the extensive lore that fans might bring. Adapting Stephen King's intricate series, poses the significant challenge of appealing to two distinct audiences: devoted fans expecting faithfulness to the source material, and casual viewers wanting an engaging, coherent movie that doesn't require prior knowledge or background research. If the film strays from the original story or condenses its rich plot, it must at least stand as a quality film on its own terms, with compelling characters, a clear narrative arc, and immersive world building that invites viewers into its universe. Otherwise, one must ask, who exactly is the target audience? Brand recognition alone can't sustain interest in the long run. Filmmakers need to create a work that resonates emotionally and intellectually, inspiring investment for sequels or spin-offs, and building a loyal fan base. A bad movie can't build a lasting franchise or loyal fan base, no matter how popular the source material. That said, the film wasn't as bad as I feared. While far from great, it's not among the worst adaptations or fantasy films I've seen over the years. Some moments worked well, especially Roland's fish-out-of-water scenes in New York City, which added humor, freshness, and a welcome break to an otherwise muddled storyline. The action sequences, particularly Idris Elba's gunslinging prowess, were energetic and entertaining, hinting at what a more focused and well-structured film might achieve with proper development. The cast was solid. Young lead Tom Taylor admirably carried much emotional weight as Jake, while Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey's charisma kept their characters compelling, even when hampered by weak script material that failed to fully exploit their potential. However, the movie barely develops its characters beyond surface levels, giving little reason to care about their fates or motivations, especially antagonist Walter, whose desire to destroy the tower remains vague, underexplored, and ultimately unsatisfying. Overall, the film suffers from a lack of clarity and depth. As someone who enjoys immersive world building, I've found flaws in other fantasy and sci-fi films, but still appreciated their efforts to craft rich, believable settings that draw the audience in. The Dark Tower offers almost no lore or context, no detailed history, factions, villain backstories, or clear explanation of the tower's cosmic significance, or why its destruction matters on a universal scale. I wanted to invest in the story and universe, but so little information was provided to spark curiosity or emotional connection, making it hard to care or understand the stakes involved. This absence of a textured world, combined with rushed pacing, confusing plot choices, and underdeveloped themes, left me feeling detached and underwhelmed, rather than captivated or excited for more installments or expansions in this universe. The poorly developed world building in this film is largely a consequence of its rushed pacing and brief runtime, giving the impression that the filmmakers were eager to wrap things up quickly so they could move on to the next project. We are never afforded a moment to connect deeply with the characters, or to uncover any distinctive aspects of the setting, as the story relentlessly pushes forward from one plot point to the next, without pause. This haste results in a narrative that feels shallow and riddled with cliches. The plot is packed with too many convenient coincidences for my liking. Jake discovers the portal to another world simply because a higher power directed him there, and immediately upon entering, he encounters the exact person he needs. This gunslinger then agrees to join him because he's on a revenge mission targeting the same villain Jake has been seeing in visions. While this is a familiar setup for the Chosen One trope and has been done many times before, The Dark Tower offers no fresh take or style, making the movie dull and uninspiring. It's essentially the same story we've seen over and over in countless other blockbusters, just presented with a different title. The climax was equally hurried, with Roland's defeat of Walter feeling cheap and unsatisfying. Instead of triumphing through a skill or lesson developed throughout the movie, Roland astonishingly pulls off a trick shot, akin to something from Dude Perfect, which left me expecting a more meaningful resolution. Overall, the film was forgettable, with the only standout moment being a clever reloading trick performed by Roland. I'm hopeful that Mike Flanagan's adaptation will come to life, but unless a studio is willing to invest a massive budget, an accurate and well-executed adaptation seems unlikely in the near future. Of course, this is just the perspective of someone who hasn't read the books yet, though I definitely plan to, as they seem like something I would enjoy. To conclude, it's no surprise that The Dark Tower turned out to be such a failure, given its decade-long struggle through production hell, bouncing between various studios and directors. When the movie finally did get made, creative control was fought over by multiple parties, leading to a disjointed final product. Upon release, it flopped at the box office and was widely panned by critics and fans alike, effectively killing any hopes for a franchise. That's the complicated story behind the 2017 adaptation of The Dark Tower. Yet another franchise that never came to be. So what do you think about The Dark Tower? Have you read the books? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Here's a hint for next week's video.